In 1989, a physicist walked into a Nevada television studio and changed UFO history forever. His name was bob-lazar. He claimed to have spent months inside a classified facility called S-4 just outside Area 51, reverse engineering spacecraft that did not originate on Earth. For over 3 decades, the U.S. government has refused to confirm or deny his story. Not refute. Refuse. And that refusal itself has become the most compelling evidence that something extraordinary happened in that desert. Today, we investigate what Lazar actually saw, and what the pattern of silence reveals about what they're still hiding. On November 10, 1989, investigative journalist George Knapp broadcast an interview that would alter UFO investigation forever. His guest was Robert Lazar, a physicist claiming direct experience with extraterrestrial technology recovered by the United States government. Lazar's story was specific. He had worked at a facility called S-4, located approximately 15 miles south of Area 51, between November 1988 and April 1989. During this period, he claimed to have reviewed and contributed to the analysis of 9 non-human spacecraft, craft that operated on principles of physics fundamentally distinct from anything developed in terrestrial laboratories. Lazar's account included technical details that would have been dismissed as science fiction from any other source. Gravity wave propulsion systems, advanced materials responding to consciousness, and references to element 115, an element that would not be officially synthesized by mainstream science until 2003. What distinguished Lazar's testimony from typical UFO folklore was its restraint. He claimed no stolen technology. He provided no physical artifacts. Instead, he offered something subtly more powerful, a detailed technical narrative that satisfied both scientific curiosity and psychological need for confirmation that intelligence exists beyond Earth, and that our government knows this fact and maintains active programs to conceal it. Knapp's broadcast reached limited initial audience, but it would become foundational to all subsequent Area 51 whistleblower discourse. Lazar's testimony established the template, specific enough to be credible, vague enough to be unfalsifiable, and structured to exploit the gap between what government admits and what citizens suspect. Lazar might have remained an isolated footnote in UFO history, discreditable through bureaucratic silence. Instead, a peculiar phenomenon occurred. Decades later, credentialed government insiders began providing partial corroboration, not of Lazar's specific claims, but of his fundamental assertion that non-human craft exist in government custody. In 2017, Luis Elizondo, former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, began advocating for UAP disclosure. His testimony carefully avoided endorsing Lazar, while describing phenomena that aligned with Lazar's foundational narrative. In 2023, Air Force Intelligence Officer David Grush testified before Congress that the U.S. government possesses intact and partially intact non-human biological entities recovered from crash sites. Again, no direct mention of S-4 or Lazar, yet the narrative threads aligned. What becomes visible in analyzing these parallel testimonies is an architecture of distributed credibility. Each whistleblower provides pieces, individually deniable, collectively reinforcing. Elizondo can claim UAP exist without confirming Lazar. Grush can reference non-human biologics without specifying location or date. Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, simultaneously validates and obscures by claiming knowledge he cannot legally share. This pattern suggests either coordinated narrative construction, a conspiracy within the disclosure movement itself, or institutional evolution. As classified technologies genuinely become obsolete or lose strategic significance, they migrate from absolutely denied to officially ambiguous. The government's strategic response mirrors Lazar's original approach. The critical anomaly at the heart of the Lazar narrative concerns not what exists, but what doesn't. Documentation. If Lazar worked at S-4 between November 1988 and April 1989, he would have required a security clearance, background investigation, and employee identification. These documents exist for other classified programs. We know this because declassified FOIA releases confirm the bureaucratic architecture of secrecy. Yet despite 3 decades of FOIA requests, congressional inquiries, and investigative journalism, no employment record has surfaced. This absence operates in 2 interpretive directions. Skeptics argue it proves Lazar fabricated his employment, that no facility called S-4 required him because the facility never employed him. Believers argue that S-4's classification runs so deep that even employee names remain redacted beyond FOIA access, that special access programs operate outside normal bureaucratic trails. Both interpretations rest on unfalsifiable assumptions. More troubling is Lazar's initial misrepresentation of his educational credentials. When first interviewed, Lazar claimed degrees from MIT and Los Alamos University, institutions that later confirmed they had no record of him. These credentials were eventually found at community colleges he had attended. This inconsistency created permanent credibility damage. If Lazar fabricated his educational background, what prevents him from fabricating employment experience? Yet here too, the pattern proves ambiguous. Perhaps Lazar exaggerated credentials to appear more credible to journalists before legitimate credentials existed, or perhaps he deliberately obscured his true background to protect sources. The void of verification contains multiple possible truths, none definitively provable. This is the mechanism through which narratives survive scrutiny, by existing in permanent superposition between falsehood and unconfirmed. The deepest insight into the Area 51 whistleblower phenomenon concerns not the claims themselves, but the government's response structure. If bob-lazar is a fraud, why has the U.S. government never issued categorical refutation? The government possesses documentation sufficient to destroy his credibility instantly. Employment records explicitly stating his name does not appear in any classified facility database. Certification that S-4 does not exist as a military installation. Public statements from actual Area 51 personnel categorically denying Lazar's work at the facility. Yet these refutations never arrive. Instead, official responses maintain studied ambiguity. The Pentagon acknowledges UAP phenomena while refusing to confirm extraterrestrial origin. Congress holds hearings on classified recovery programs while producing no documentation. Declassified statements reference special access programs without naming them. This posture appears defensive, yet it achieves something defensive denials cannot. It preserves uncertainty while avoiding appearance of defensive cover-up. A government that clearly states Lazar is lying, S-4 is fiction invites the response. Then why the extensive denials? Ambiguity allows institutional authority to remain unchallenged while public uncertainty persists. More significantly, this silence allows a particular institutional arrangement to continue undisturbed. The existence of classified programs operating beyond constitutional oversight, funded through black budgets, staffed by compartmentalized personnel, generating knowledge asymmetrically distributed along security clearance hierarchies. If Lazar's core claim proves true, that non-human technology exists in government custody and that reverse engineering programs operate outside public awareness, then the entire structure of representative democracy becomes performance theater. This perspective explains the government's preference for silence. Categorical denial threatens credibility if later contradicted. Categorical confirmation triggers institutional reformation demands. Ambiguity preserves.
Bob-Lazar's claims exemplify the burden of proof fallacy. asserting that absence of refutation constitutes evidence. The government has no obligation to refute every conspiracy claim. Doing so would legitimize unfounded allegations. Regarding employment verification, classified programs do obscure employment records, but Lazar has had decades to produce colleagues. Colleagues have had opportunity to corroborate independently, and none have provided verifiable confirmation beyond his own testimony. Lazar's prescience about element 115 reflects elementary chemistry. Periodic table gaps were publicly known. Predicting their eventual synthesis required no hidden knowledge. The convergence of recent UAP testimonies, Grush, Elizondo, Mellon, reflects the psychological phenomenon of narrative accommodation. Once Lazar's framework circulates culturally, later witnesses unconsciously adapt their descriptions to fit existing expectations. This is well documented in false memory research and eyewitness testimony studies. Furthermore, declassified projects like Oxcart demonstrate that unconventional aircraft provide sufficient explanation for historical UFO sightings. The argument that government silence indicates guilt commits a logical error. Silence can equally reflect indifference to baseless claims. Occam's razor strongly favors. Lazar crafted a technically plausible fiction that successfully exploited public fascination with aerospace mysteries and institutional opacity, creating a self-perpetuating narrative immune to falsification because claims remain deliberately unverifiable.